Welcome everyone to either welcome back if you've been before, or welcome to our merry band of grounded theorists, and welcome to our first online seminar of this academic year. We have a series of 5 planned for this year. We'll see in a little bit, and hopefully everyone has found it relatively easy to navigate and enroll and all those kind of things. And I think Janet is just about to ping in as well. There we go. Hi, Janet. Welcome. For today, I'm going to hand over to Hilary to do some very skillful chairing, and then we go from there. Hilary, I'm going to move the slide on for you.
Okay, thank you, Nicky.
Hopefully this is today. Over to you, please.
That is definitely today. Thanks, Nicky, and welcome everybody. It's exciting for us to be convening, and we're just sneaking it into this academic year. But as Nicky said, we've got the rest of the year planned, and we'll be sharing those dates with you at the end of this session. But we don't want to hear me talk about that. What we really want to do is to get on to the theme and the talk of today, and today we're very lucky because we've got 3 excellent speakers with us. We've got Dr. Janet Allison and Pippa Hills, who's going to be talking about constructivist grounded theory, and in particular why they chose constructivist grounded theory. And then we've got Nicky following us to think about what Glazerian grounded theory means and what that contributes to our understanding of the grounded theory toolbox of ways of doing it. Following their short presentations, we'll have a discussion, questions and answers, or just general conversation. And then we'll go through the future dates and topics we'll be covering in this seminar series. I'll be doing the chairing in between. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. But please, as the speakers are speaking, everybody, if you've got questions and you have access to the chat, please do put your questions in there so we don't forget them. Or if it's just a general thought, general comment, please contribute to the chat in that way as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand us over to our first speakers. I'm delighted to welcome Janet and Pippa.
Hello, I can't share and I've got slides. I didn't realise Pippa was doing it too, so I've actually got a full 10 minutes worth, but is that okay?
That's okay. You are forgiven, and I'm now going to allow you to share. Pippa. Give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Where are you in my list? Oh, there we are, Janet. Why are you? Oh, there you are. You're in my list twice. Make a presenter. Change. Right, now you should have the rights. It was not on purpose, I promise. So I'm going to stop, and you can start.
Okay, I'll talk fast, Pippa.
Take your time, Janet. Use all the time you were planning on using.
I haven't timed it, but I have. So I've got slides. Let me go from presenter slides. Okay, so I'm looking at, and I'm just going to get going. So I'm looking at why constructivist grounded theory is constructivist being highlighted there. So I'm Dr. Janet Allison. I'm a doctor for a year. It's about my year anniversary. So wonderful. So I'm a clinical educator and I work in intercultural psychiatry education. But over the last year, I've also taken on a sensory lead role in acute mental health care. My background's OT. So I'm doing that across Derbyshire Healthcare. And I'm also become a sort of OT lead stroke researcher sort of thing in a mind care hospital in Tamil Nadu in India, which will become more obvious why that matters to me. I'm going on January the 4th and I'm terribly excited. I've been 3 times this year. I'm going again soon. So why constructivist grounded theory is my ideal methodology? This is because it fits my purpose, which is to understand a process. That would be the same for any grounded theory. But it also fits my context. My research was in India and decolonization was part of that. And it's really important that the context is taken into account with where you're researching. But in alignment with both of those, it fits me. It fits my philosophical position of how knowledge is known and how knowledge is found or constructed. It fits my positionality in relation to my participants. And it also fits my style, fits my style. I'm fairly chatty, so it's very helpful for me to co-construct with people. That's how I teach. I'm a social constructivist educator, so it fits who I am. So I'm coming back to these at the end, and I'm hopefully going to talk you through some of these things. So starting with purpose, and I've highlighted the words that I think link more to constructivist elements. To understand a process, that's what we all do. Mine was about engagement in psychiatry in India. India is the context, so it's to understand the process in India. How and why questions, again, are very much linked to grounded theory, but again in India. So that was my question. How and why do they engage or disengage in underground psychiatry education in India? And these how and why questions lead me to an interpretivist paradigm, which just defining that is about understanding and interpreting perceptions, meanings, and actions. It's inductive in the interpretivist paradigm. So I'm going to have understanding arising from the data, as you know. So no preconceived hypothesis. So we're already pointing towards not doing anything too positivist. I'm not measuring anything, and I'm not analysing power differentials. I aim is to understand and interpret, therefore I'm an interpretivist. This is all about my philosophical position now. This is where I am, and my methodology needed to fit with this. So I have discovered I am a relativist, and what that means is there are multiple subjective realities, that it's individually interpreted, but it is relative because I'm a relativist to the perceptions of others. So those around me might have similar perceptions, potentially. If you live in one culture, you might think similarly to others. It's also situated in social context, including cultural. That's the psychiatry department where I did most of my research, which is in Mumbai. So going back then, the ontology is relativism, and I believe that relativist perceptions are built together, which is where social constructivism comes in. I've defined that for you as well. The belief that knowledge is socially constructed through exploring those multiple perceptions. It's not created, it's not discovered. So I argue with the word findings, really. Have we found it? Are they findings? Did we find them? Were they there already? Or did we construct them? They're my constructions, not my findings, but there we are. So you construct by linking multiple concepts together. You don't have to agree because reality is multifaceted. There is no one absolute truth. And again, as I said, influenced by context, culture, status, and all those sorts of things. And my values come in that too, which is where the reflexivity comes in, which I mention later. So when you put all that together, understanding a process, how and why questions, context of India, relativism, social constructivism, constructivist grounded theory just is the natural way to go, really. The ideal way to go. Why anybody would research in any other way is beyond me. So why constructivist grounded theory? It fits me in my question and it fits my context, as I've said. Oh, there's me with some people. I was doing what they were doing. I was just fitting in. My ontology believes there are multiple realities. My epistemology is collaborative. We work stuff out together across the whole of life, usually. And my research is intercultural and promotes this mutuality of curiosity, which is something that is in the decolonized framework. There's a reciprocity or a mutuality of understanding. And we all thought things we'd not thought before. There was a linking within that. And this is particularly relevant because I'm a white woman in India, so I needed to co-construct, meaning else I would have missed something. It's really, really logical when you think about it. Of course, this is the way that I went. And I was asked about this in my Viva, actually, why constructivist grounded theory? And the points I'm making now, in a shortened version, I've got 3 headings, and that's where I'm at. These were the points I made. Fits me, fits my context, fits my purpose. So this methodology led to some methods, and the co-construction is within those methods. In constructivist grounded theory, co-construction is the aim. This fits in with where I sit philosophically. Focus groups were my main tool of finding out the things that I wanted to find out, or constructing the things I wanted to construct, but I used other ways as well. And these methods answered this question. Now, the methods I did in just a normal way, really. 3 phases. They were iterative, focus groups, and the role of the researcher within those focus groups would possibly be different to how if Nikki ran a focus group, there is this co-construction of understanding that is kind of essential within it. And again, I did that in phase 2 as well. I did a couple of phases. Then I did a closed questionnaire. But before I sent that round, I did check that with some of the interns I've met earlier. I did discuss that and co-construct, is this the right questions? Is the right way to approach it? How do I do that? And then I analysed repeatedly, as one would, constantly comparing things. So that's very similar to what Nikki would have done. But it's this co-construction of the data is really essential when you're thinking about constructivist grounded theory. Now, underpinning it all, because of that co-construction, you have to have your axiology is coming in, which means about your values. And they underpin all the different areas that you're focusing on. Positionality and reflexivity are part of that. For me, decolonization practice was really important. Just one really quick slide on it, because I know I don't always have to mention it, but I just feel it's so important. Constructivist grounded theory fits so well with decolonization principles. Just the top ones of those are, there is a mutual benefit, which is what the reciprocity means. This isn't just for me to get my hat. And I struggled, Hilary will vouch, on the day of getting my floppy hat, I struggled because I thought I'm not being mutual. They should be here. It's not just me. How can I've stolen from them to get my doctorate? She put me straight, so I was fine. But it's a thing. It really matters to me. Critical reflexivity, to ensure that I'm holding myself to account. So when you're co-constructing, that it's not just my interpretation. That really mattered to me. And some of the ways I did things had to change. Therefore, part of this collaborative communication skills to co-construct was really important. Enabling agency, where we go. I had to learn to be less anal. I'm not quite there, but I certainly was less anal when I was in Mumbai and nobody turned up and it didn't go as I thought. A really helpful thing to do. Last one, transformative practice, which means there's a bigger aim, that collaboratively we want to make a difference in the world going forwards, and that we want to do that together. There are links to action research actually in some of the ways that I'm describing this, and I think that's quite an interesting way that would have been an alternative. That's where this model of decolonization came from. So nearly finished. These, when you put together the understanding, the interpretivist paradigm, the fact the context was in India, my philosophical stance, my positionality and reflexivity, when you add all that together, you will end up with this co-constructed understanding of the process of whatever it is. And it is a constructed grounded theory. I'd never thought of it like that before, but we constructed a grounded theory. And it's that constructed grounded theory that answered that purpose. Okay, so the purpose is really important. India was important. The relativism was important. Social constructivism was important. And this co-construction within the groups were important, as was the values. When you put them all together, you fit this: the purpose, the context, and me. When you add those in, I had to do constructivist grounded theory. And it is arguable, why is it my ideal? Why is it my ideal methodology? Why is it not everybody's ideal methodology? But I'm sure Nikki will have something to say about that. And there's me with one of my co-constructors. Well, he was my gatekeeper, Dr. Avinash, with whom I've now co-published and written several things, and that's wonderful that we are taking it forward into transformative practice. So that's my little, I think that was probably less than 10 minutes, which is pretty fair going for me. So I would now like to hand over to my beautiful allied health professional colleague, Pippa.
Thanks, Janet. Especially as you used all the big words, so I can get away without not saying those big words. Hello. I'm Pippa Hales. I'm a speech and language therapist by background. I work at Royal Papworth Hospital, and I now work as the Chief Allied Health Professional in the Trust. And I am just starting my 6th year of my professional doctorate, Anglia Ruskin University, looking at the professional identity of the allied health professions. So it's very much interwoven with my role, which is really a key factor in me doing grounded theory in the first place. And I suppose I don't know about if there's many people here, I know Janet does, who are trained healthcare professionals, but a lot of our training is very much in a post-positivist field where generally there is one truth, everything is a textbook patient, and certainly my training was that belief. I did a research master's and it was all about statistics and quantitative methodologies. I didn't know there were really any other approaches out there other than surveys, and wasn't going near those. And so my doctoral journey has really educated me on the different methodologies, but actually my position as a researcher as well. And I think certainly being a practice-based researcher, that's been incredibly important to understand. I suppose reflect on my practice, that I'm not a positivist, post-positivist person in my practice. I co-construct my my care with patients or my care with my colleagues. I co-construct that. It's not a one truth. I bring into that construction social context, the environment that we're in, what's going on for that person at that time, their social beliefs, cultural beliefs. So exploring all the different approaches enabled me to embrace that side of my practice that I'd not even been given the terminology to do before. So that's probably what took me to grounded theory in the first place, understanding that it existed, and then there was that deeper layer of knowing that, oh my goodness, there's different approaches. Have to get stuck into that, and certainly for me, understanding that in a digestible way was the Burks and Mills text. I think it was their first edition, and now they've got their updated version, because that explained to me the different approaches, and or the different lenses you can apply to grounded theory, and I think that's really key in helping you determine what's the right approach, is being able to justify why you didn't do a particular approach. Why didn't I need to understand the Glazerian approach in order to be able to help me understand more why I did choose the constructivist lens. So for me, co-construction is absolutely key, because of, as Janet said, that's who I am. That's my training. That's my approach. But also because this is a field where I'm entering it with my own. There's so many layers. Where do you start? I'm approaching it with my own. The field with my own knowledge, my own experience, biases, assumptions. So I need an approach that embraces reflexivity and recognises the position of the researcher in that co-construction of data. I'm not neutral to that, whereas the constructivist approach embraces more overtly the researcher's position. It's also, I needed this area, this lens or grounded theory in particular, because it's an area where there isn't research out there already that answers this question. I can't test against an existing theory, so I needed something that was going to help me understand the social process, and the constructivist lens in particular was going to help with that explanation of the field that I'm working in. And again, I think it's, for me, as I'd said, I am an AHP studying AHPs. There's clear power dynamics going on there, so it had to be the constructivist lens enables me to acknowledge that power dynamic and embrace it, that actually that's not something to be afraid of, but enables me to bring my knowledge and help me to guide and be more sensitive to the data that's coming back and that I'm constructing with my interviewees, but also being mindful of the impact that my relationship in that dynamic may have on the construction. So just gives you that broader lens to be able to open your eyes and be very authentic and open and honest about your thoughts and your processes as part of that construction, because it's all one and the same things. I think probably the last thing that I've considered along the way is that I think when I first looked at it, it was a bit like looking at the different methodologies. They are, it's very binary, one thing or the other, and then I appreciate the Burks and Mills approach, which is less, you're following one version or the other, but actually grounded theory is a set of methods, and you're applying a different lens to those methods. And some people might not be fixed in one field or another, but I think it's about really understanding who you as a researcher are, and that's that whole epistemology ontological stance, as Janet's talked through, and then applying that to your question and your purpose. And I absolutely love this approach. It's been perfect, absolutely, for this study. But I would also be very open to thinking about using something different for the next research study, because it may well require a different methodology or a different approach in order to get the best out of that research. Thank you.
Right. I shall add my 2p to the mix, because unlike Pippa and Janet, I'm the weird one out, because A, I'm not a healthcare professional, which makes me the odd one out, and B, I'm a Clauserian grounded theorist, which makes me a minority these days. The only more minor minority is the Straussians, because they seem to have vanished off the planet for some reason. To the point where 5 years ago, I was in a conference where I was representing Clauserian grounded theory, and I was the only one in a room of 100. All the others were constructivists, and there was not a single Straussian grounded theorist in the room. So that made me feel quite small, and equally quite important, because I had to defend Glaser. So I think my choice for Clauserian grounded theory goes back to what Janet and Pippa already indicated, and what Hilary put in the chat a little while ago, that for me, the choice for Clauserian grounded theory was twofold. It was, first, grounded theory as a way of doing research needs to link up to my purpose. So the purpose of my research was to explain how my participants did what they did, which grounded theory does. But then within that, the variant or the flavor of grounded theory, if you will, needed to match with my positionality as an animal scientist turned social scientist, right? I started life as an animal scientist and a veterinary nurse. My general research participants don't talk back. Therefore, research is not as messy, at least not in the philosophical sense, because animals don't talk. We're used to measuring stuff and measuring behavior. So I was very much in that positivist environment. And whilst doing my doctorate and whilst getting my research underway, it became very evident when I was thinking more and more about this, that when I start working with people, values kind of come into play. But equally, I've still felt very much in that positivist realm. So I shifted a little bit. I went from being a positivist to being a post-positivist, but I was quite comfortable in that bracket, in that I still feel that although we can measure stuff and there is stuff that's real, and we have that we can derive truths from things, there is also the thing that we can never know everything, because we're dealing with people. So and people are just weird like that. So I ended up settling on Glaser, but then my task became just making sure that justification really, really fit and worked. And ultimately, the main criticisms, I guess, from Glaserian grounded theory are around emergence of codes and categories and concepts and the theory, and around objectivity, right? And how can you justify Clausian grounded theory, because you can't always be objective. Now that always being objective thing, for me, a lot of people have a very narrow view of objectivity, and they mean objectivity means that there is no subjectivity, which linguistically makes sense. But for me, I interpret objectivity to be that we do our research through being as transparent as we can be about how we do that research, about our research practice, and about our justifications, and make sure that everything we do is as transparent as possible, so that others can judge and give value to what we produce. Now, that is my take on objectivity, and from that perspective, there is nothing wrong with being a Clausian grounded theorist, as long as you can be as transparent as you can be, which in my case meant that I had to very transparently and robustly explore my positionality and my background as a researcher, which I ultimately did through a presuppositional interview, which made it very transparent and made it very clear where I stood and how I influenced my research. Now, Glaser never really concerned himself about that, because his argument was memoing will fix that for you. But this is where we then need to marry Clausian grounded theory with modern takes and practices on doing research, right? Everything needs to be transparent these days for research to have value, because you want your end user to be able to make that decision. Equally, arguments around emergence, I think the majority of the arguments around emergence are really based on a very narrow definition of what emergence means. But there's a really, really good paper by Dehaan and colleagues, which was published, what was it, probably about 15 or so years ago now, where they teased apart different types of emergence and what those different types of emergence mean, right? And they looked at emergence through lenses of the observer and the way that the observation goes. So observation from a post-positivist paradigm, if you will, we have this thing called discovery emergence, and discovery emergence is where the observer is an external party and the observation goes in a single direction. Whereas, for example, in a constructivist paradigm, where we're looking at co-construction of theory, if we look at Dehaan's work, we can classify that under mechanistic emergence, where the observer can still be an external party, but, for example, the direction of the observation goes both ways. It's a bidirectional observation because we work together with our participants. Whereas from a more interpretive paradigm, we have this reflective emergence, which the observer is very much an internal observer, and the observation is still bidirectional. So we have a fully integrated observer within a community. Now, of course, putting stuff in boxes like that is always somewhat problematic, but for me as a post-positivist, that the discovery emergence fitted very much with how I see the world as a scientist used to observing things, right? So that meant for me that, yes, I see myself at the time, saw myself as a Clausian grounded theorist. But then I made some modifications to allow for that increased transparency. These days, I'm very much in a camp where I don't put a type on it anymore. I'm just a grounded theorist. And I use the tools that I need to use to let that grounded theory develop, right? Because ultimately, my take on this is that every grounded theorist ultimately aims to achieve the same thing, which is to end up with a grounded theory that explains the basic social process. Regardless of which type of grounded theory or which flavor of grounded theory you adhere to, that is your end goal. So does it then really matter what the philosophical underpinnings are? If we go back to Glaser's roots, grounded theory was just a method, right? Which goes back to my comment in the chat earlier around, is grounded theory a methodology or is it a method? And that simply depends on who you ask, right? So don't be afraid of using your own positionality to take a stance, but then also don't be afraid to make some pragmatic choices to either fit your grounded theory within a doctoral box, because that's not always easy. There will be some compromises that need to be made, and there's a really good paper out there that was published in Grounded Theory Review in 2009 around a compromised research proposal for grounded theory, for example. And also, don't be afraid to extend grounded theory by doing new things, because it's a method, it's a way of doing research that's ever evolving, right? And that's kind of my take on this, and it's a very simplistic way of looking at things, but then as a scientist that works for me. So that's kind of where I stand on this, but now I'm going to be very interested to be told that I'm wrong, because that's always a good way to start these things. But I think where Hillary now, Hillary hit the nail on the head. Positionality is key. Does it trump the underpinning assumptions? I think that depends on what the underpinning assumptions are. And assumptions about what? About you as a researcher, about the research that you're doing, or about where you see yourself fit in the world?
And how you got to them.
And how you got to them.
But surely the underpinning assumptions of grounded theory are exactly that, and unchanging.
Well, that depends on who you ask. Glaser's assumptions are not Kathy Sharma's assumptions, which are not Anselm Strauss's assumptions, which are not Burke's and Mills's assumptions. And they're all grounded theories.
So Sharma's was built on the original, and at some point those assumptions were accepted and in some sense refuted or developed or advanced, but it still stems from that underpinning assumption of the premise of what grounded theory is and what it's meant to do. And of course it's that makes it different to phenomenology, for example.
Yeah, and I think Richard there absolutely hit the nail on the head. There are some basic assumptions around grounded theory that it tries to explain a basic social process, right? Every grounded theory does that, aims to do that. And I think that's where the philosophy doesn't really, that the assumptions don't really matter, but they then start to influence how you actually go about doing that. And I think there's a slight distinction there between the assumptions of grounded theory and the assumptions of the grounded theorist who is doing the research. But these things are always very messy, and that's why, as Tim just said, all the theses that you read about grounded theory are all slightly different, because everyone brings their own thing to this.
So, Tim, can we bring you into the conversation here? Because I think that's really important, what you've said there. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I did a constructivist grounded theory based, I think, probably on my understanding of positionality, looking at the previous comments. So I was a paramedic interviewing paramedics about a thing. So I was kind of a bit like Pippa, I guess, in that kind of place. So felt that constructivist fitted my kind of where I was and how I understood that kind of co-creation process. But then within that, okay, I'm a constructivist. I'll use constructivist grounded theory. I read Burke and Mills. That seemed pretty straightforward. I read Chalmers. It confused me a lot. It got easier to understand what she was talking about the further I got through my thesis. But yeah, every time I read a thesis, they'd all used different words to mean different things. So when you started looking at the data analysis, you had like some people are doing initial coding, some people doing open coding. Sometimes they're the same things, sometimes they're different. Some people are doing advanced coding, some aren't at all. Some people within advanced coding are doing diagramming, some are doing theoretical something or others where you pick words and try and stick your words on categories. I mean, some people had very different ideas of what a category was and defined it in different ways. So I felt every time I came across a concept and I thought I understood it, I then read something else that used that concept in a completely different way. And in the end, I just took an approach where I decided what bits I thought would work for me, and in my thesis said, right, this is my first bit of data analysis. I'm going to be calling it initial coding, and this is what I mean by it. And then I'm going to develop focus coding, and this is what I mean by it. And it's like sticking all the little initial bits together and then seeing what they come out with. And when I'm talking about a category, this is what I mean by it. So I had coding, and I had memoing, and I had theoretical saturation, and so I had all of the bits that you'd find in a textbook, but what I meant by those bits would be different from what someone else meant by them. And that's the kind of conclusion I came to, is that, within that broad umbrella of constructivist grounded theory, there were some core bits that I think I would expect to see in a grounded theory. Like if you weren't doing any memoing and you weren't doing any data analysis, and you weren't doing the data analysis alongside the data collection, I think, and you weren't generating a theory at the end of it, I think I'd probably say, well, it's probably not really a grounded theory. But within that, what your bits of your data analysis look like and how you decide to go about doing them, I think there's a lot of scope for.
And that's very much the Burks and Mills approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got your underpinning methods, the core principles of grounded theory, and then beyond that, it's do what's right. Whereas when I was writing that chapter, I like that idea. It's that exploratory idea of, okay, let's not just accept this particular way. But what was lovely is to have that idea, but I still came back to the constructivist lens that was what was right for me. But I suppose it's making sure that you understand, like you say, you can justify what initial coding and focus coding is for you and how you've applied it to match with those core principles.
And I think if you look at what the grounded theory landscape is now, so of course, we all talk about constructivist grounded theory, we all talk about Strauss, we all talk about Glaser, we all talk about Burks and Mills, but there is more out there, right? There is feminist grounded theory, there is socio-technical grounded theory, there are all so many different types of grounded theory out there that all have their own kind of philosophical underpinnings, but ultimately, they're all trying to explain a basic social process. And I think that's the key thing. So there are these core elements that all types of grounded theory have in common. And I think that's kind of what binds us as a group of researchers, where sometimes I feel that we're making too much out of this. What type of grounded theory is it? And I fully agree with Burks and Mills there, is that doesn't really matter anymore. I think that having those slightly more pragmatic approaches to doing grounded theory doesn't mean that you're not doing grounded theory. I just realized I'm not 100% sure if everyone can see the chat. So if you can't, does anyone have any other bits to add to this? Because I'm seeing some new faces, which I'm very excited about. But do we have any additional bits from anyone else in the room? We could talk about this for weeks because it's an interesting topic. But is there anyone here very early on in their journey, or is anyone who's very late in their journey?
I'm an early one.
Yeah, you're a very early one. You're coming to terms with the fact that you're going to be a grounded theorist, Richard, and that comes with trauma in itself. But it will get better, I promise.
So, Richard, what's drawing you towards this grounded theory thing?
So, long story short, so I'm a serving head teacher, and I've just come out of doing my master's, and I've signed up to do a PhD route, and I'm looking at, broadly speaking, adverse childhood effects and primary head teachers' decision making.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm interested to see if it has anything to do with it. So I'm trying to construct my proposal to take forward, and I'm interested in grounded theory because there's absolutely nothing to do with leading as a head teacher and your own adverse childhood effects. There's loads on kids, there's loads about the military, there's loads about sort of, we know we should not have bad things happen to kids. We know this, there's loads of research on it. It has financial implications, socioeconomic implications, it has health implications, mental health implications, actual health implications, loads of stuff. But no one has really looked at the impact on decision making. So there's nothing out there. So I was drawn to grounded theory for the simple fact that I'm totally open, because whilst I am so positionality, I'm a head teacher. So theoretically, I'm very sensitive to this. And also being open, I also have ACEs in my personal background. So there is a certain amount of positionality that I'm bringing there. But the fact that there's no knowledge as such that I can find on this just makes it completely open. So grounded theory to me really interests me, because actually I would like to explain decision making and see if something else is in there. That's where I'm coming at this from.
So the social process you're looking at is decision making.
Yes, the social process
in a very defined context.
Yes. So leadership of schools, specifically primary schools. And I chose primary schools not just because I'm a primary school head teacher, but also because you are immediately close. You're the next step in position to the primary carer. So the primary social carer is obviously the parent or the initial carer. And then the next step is school. And the first school you go to is primary school. But very early on. Very early on.
Okay. And are you considering any other methodologies as well?
So I'm really drawn to constructivist grounded theory, but I'm also looking at an element of quantitative as well. I'm looking at whether there's a prevalence of ACEs. So again, I'm sort of weighing all this up. So I'm thinking about having a mixed methodology in that sense, so that I can look at prevalence and also explore decision making, and then see if the two intertwine.
And I guess the really intriguing thing from there, in a grounded theory sense, is that how you collect your data is iterative. You know, you collect some data in order to know what you're going to look for next.
Yeah.
I think that's worth thinking about in relation to what you're talking about here, because you talk from one stance, from a very convincing grounded theory sense, a constructivist sense, but on the other side, it could also be a mixed methodology that doesn't need grounded theory. Or it could be a case study.
Could be a case study. I need to make decisions. I'm really drawn to the grounded theory aspect of it, because it would help to explain a social theory process and come up with something new from it.
Yeah, I mean, sounds fascinating. So I'll be interested in following your thinking process through, in where your thinking takes you. But I think one thing that's always key whenever we're thinking about this, especially in our early stages, is always, what is your purpose? What is it you're trying to find out about? That should always lead where you go to. So I said earlier, sometimes I have to ask questions that make me, and I get scared even thinking about it, count things up, kind of thing. You know, I'm not a natural quantitative person. I always go to someone else when I need to do anything quant related. I always have to draw on somebody else's expertise, but the research purpose demands it. And I think it's so easy to be seduced by methodologies, because you know we naturally, some of us naturally align to certain ones, and then our research purpose isn't fitting, and then you get this sort of bolt-on effect. So everyone at their early stages, just be aware of that, and be aware of why you might be drawn to something, and if you're accidentally trying to bolt two things together, I see we've got a couple of others early as well. Does anybody else want to share where they are in relation to the thing? Because I understand this is a really difficult thing that we're thinking about here. Would anybody else like to share their early thoughts?
Well, I'm started just in September, so I just managed to submit my first submission last Wednesday. I was very proud of myself. But it's exactly, I think, how the comments are kind of appearing on the chat is that when we start, we obviously already starting to hear all the, you know, I think personally, you kind of familiarize yourself with qualitative and quantitative, and you're quite happy that you kind of understand what methodology is, because one is numbers, one is not numbers. And then obviously you start to get into it, and it just grows into a jungle of words and variations and types. And I think being at that early stage where you think, oh my goodness, what am I even doing? I've got no idea which words actually go with what I want to do. And trying to familiarize yourself with all the language that is being used. It's just like learning different language, I find it. So I'm finding things like this meeting today, really useful, because I'm trying to jot notes for myself, and something that struck a chord with me, I'm just trying to make a note and saying, okay, actually, that seems like me, that seems like what I want to do. So yeah, it's just this process of matching, I suppose, of what I'm thinking, what actually the reality would be, and what is achievable within the time that we've got to actually complete all of it. Because I suppose, you know, if I wanted to actually get in depth in all of those different terminologies and whatnot, I'll be, you know, another who knows how many years here still sitting and reading and trying to familiarize myself with it. But there needs to be some sort of decision making at some point in time. But it's all very useful. I'm really enjoying it.
I like you bringing us back to, it's got to be doable in a time frame. Doability is so important. Nikki.
I just realised as I'm listening to all of these conversations, and I had a look at who else is in the room. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Zadie in the room, who did a really nice contribution in the International Grounded Theory Conference not too long ago about the future of grounded theory. So perhaps if we can see if we can have something there, would that be an option? I don't want to put people on the block because that's mean, but it's nice to hear from new faces as well. And I was impressed with the work that was happening in the Grounded Theory Conference.
Oh, absolutely.
So see if we can make that work.
Okay.
There we go.
Hello.
Yes, we got you.
Are you referring to me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I was a part of the panel there. I'm basically, thank you very much for organizing this. I live and work in Pakistan, and my basic area of research or my studies is language and society, how language is used in society, since we are a society where English plays a very important role and the other languages are kind of pushed back. So when you are in social linguistics, that's like, that's a foremost thought. So my thesis, of course, when I started my work, if you want me to if we have enough time for, how I selected grounded theory and all that, I can narrate that, because I've already completed my thesis, if you have the time.
Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes. I mean, we've got about 10 minutes left on the session, and
Okay.
we've got a couple of minutes, at the end to finish off, I think.
Okay, I'm going to be really quick. In social linguistics, we don't really use grounded theory. So I was kind of the first person, as far as I know, to be using grounded theory. So I had a lot of difficulty in getting the proposal passed. And in fact, I was still writing about that when you guys were talking about it. And I was recalling, the trauma that I had. I really wanted to do grounded theory, but then I did not have, because when you are doing your research, you're supposed to you're supposed to have somebody who has already done that thing before, and you're just, you show that, this person has done this kind of work, so I'm just, there's a little gap there, and I need to fill in that gap. So with me, the gap was there, but I could not convince I had a lot of difficulty, I would say, in convincing. So we kind of reached a mean position where they allowed me to do grounded theory with the proviso that I would not insist on doing it if if I felt that I was not going anywhere. So anyway, I managed to get my PhD, but then, it was a journey that was full of, I mean, it's still traumatic. It was not just a simple hard work. It was traumatic. It was full of feelings. I was scared. I was talking to people. I was convincing people. I was, like literally befriending people whom I thought would be able to help me. People I would not have ordinarily befriended. People I would not have ordinarily, gone and talked to. So, of course, in Pakistan, our PhD dissertations, they are sent abroad for examination, and there were two examiners, one from the States and the other from Canada, and they were very appreciative. But by the time their reports came back, I was still, I was not happy, and I was I was under a lot of trauma and things like that. So that's how. But I stuck to it, and I've managed to write. I've managed to write papers in some really good international journals, and I am reached out. I'm not saying that I'm like some really big shot, but yes, I'm reached out by different people uh, to write about grounded theory and social linguistics. And also these days I'm interested in formal grounded theory. I've just got my paper accepted in International Journal of Qualitative Methodology. It's a SAGE journal, and it's a very good journal. So now I've kind of switched. I'm thinking of switching to formal grounded theory. So my plan for the formal grounded theory, the next paper that I want to write on it, is that I'm not going to I'm not going to advocate any one variation. So I believe that when it comes to formal grounded theory, as I see it, I mean, it's like you have to take a rather yes, I was a Shamesian. I was even in touch with her during my PhD studies, the dissertation writing, and she was very encouraging, although she was very old and she was sick also during those days. But then she managed to answer 2 or 3 emails of mine. So now my opinion is that as far as formal grounded theory is concerned, we need to be a bit more flexible than we are, for the substantive grounded theories. So I don't know if I've made sense or not, but
I like that. Thank you. And the bits about making friends because you need people to talk to about grounded theory, guess what? That's exactly what most of us are here for.
It was not just friends, ordinary friends. It was the people in power. So, yeah. I mean, when I think about it, and when I was literally, after the dean and after, the chair of the department, and I would take time from them, and I don't know what they used to think, and they would be like, just go ahead, Sherbano, you're not doing that bad. And I would be, no, sir, I mean this, and would this be okay, and would that be okay? And it was not just my supervisor I would contact everyone from all over the world, and then I would quote them in my thesis, and then I would quote them anyway, during my seminars and submission seminars also. And I was in touch with Jen Blomet, I think, Dr. Blomet. I don't know if few people have heard of him. Anybody and everybody from my field. I even emailed Glazer, but he did not answer me. But then there were so many other people that I would email, and I would just, narrate my trauma, and it was really difficult for me. But then since then, after my PhD, it's been a great thing. I think I'm happy to be a grounded theorist now. So, and when I meet you people, and when I listen to all those that concept of uncertainty, yes, and I do go through it, but I feel that mine was just too much. I was going crazy thinking about it, whether my work would be accepted or not.
You were the pioneer.
There are two other people who have now in my department. But you see, yes, they have chosen grounded theory, but then grounded theory in social linguistics, it entails so much, because it's like, your thesis is in your content and everything that's about social linguistics, and then you have to bring everything, import onto or sort of transplant grounded theory onto it, or something like that. I'm not able to explain it really well here, but it's like, it's like straddling two really major kind of things, where you cannot let one take the precedence, or one take the lead.
I'm conscious of time, so I am going to move us on, but by all means, we can continue these conversations outside. Hilary, if I put the slide on the screen, then I'll give you back the chairing thingamabob.
Oh, thank you. Yep.
Here we go.
There we are. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Well, I've been quite active on the chat there, thinking. And what I'm doing when I'm putting those things in chat is just thoughts that are coming into my mind. So I'm listening to you speak. And the really important thing about that is that by talking about this, we learn, and we keep asking ourselves questions. But importantly, it reminds us that we have to go right back to the basics and understand what is the assumptions of what we're doing, and what do the words mean, and how are we making meaning of those words, defining that meaning, like Tim said, I think is so important. And I'm really enjoying listening how, there's a real strand or a move towards like a pragmatic type approach, this idea of a Burkes and Millsian type approach, and thinking about how grounded theory is starting to evolve and change as our ways and means of doing research changes, particularly led by our positionalities and our reflexivity as researchers in relation to what we're looking at, and the professions within which we're looking at that topic from as well. So thank you. I think that's been a really helpful and insightful discussion. I do appreciate that some of it is being quite abstract. In some sense, we kind of moved into sort of philosophical type things, but we can't avoid thinking and asking those questions when we're justifying the choices we're making in relation to our methodology. So I think this has been a really helpful discussion, if not a discussion that's going to make thinking about it cloudier, and it should be cloudy, because these are sticky questions we're asking. But enough of me. Now I'm going to think about or look at what it is we're going to do next. So our next seminar together is on Wednesday, the 19th of March, where we're going to think about designing of a grounded theory study, something that's so important in doctoral study, because a true grounded theory study doesn't align with the traditional thesis structure. So there's clever little tips and tricks we can do to design a grounded theory study. Following that, we've got Friday the 13th of June, where we're going to look at the role of literature in grounded theory. Again, another sticky, knotty thing we have to think about, and something else that doesn't fit within the traditional structure of a thesis, a doctoral thesis. Then we've got Tuesday the 9th of September, where we're going to be looking at data analysis, followed by, my goodness, a whole year's time. 17th of December, can you believe it? And we're going to be looking at the role of theorizing in grounded theory as well. So we're really going through the whole process of doing a grounded theory study. And we're going to be thinking about what these aspects of doing a grounded study mean, but importantly, how it is we learn to think about what is demanded of us during all those specific stages of doing a grounded theory piece of work. We're a minute over, everybody. I do apologise, but I think we've had some really helpful, insightful discussion. As we've identified, this has been recorded and it will be uploaded onto our Grounded Theory YouTube seminar series. Is our chat uploaded as well, Nikki, or does that stay separate?
That stays separate, but I will put a summary of the chat with the video upload, as well as a copy of the Janet's slides if she's happy to share them with us as well. I'll make sure it's all distributed via the attendee list.
Amazing. Okay. Thanks so much for that, Nikki. And everybody, I do hope you've enjoyed spending your hour with us. Do keep conversing with us and talking with us. Do spread the word. We love to see new faces. And keep grounded theorying, everyone. Thanks, everybody.
See you later, everyone.
Enjoy your day.